You've got questions? O'Reilly Auto Parts has answers. Need a pro you can trust? We've got that too. No matter what you need, our professional parts people have the training and expertise to help you do things right. Deep automotive knowledge, just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Most weight loss plans are one size fits all, not taking into account each person's individual needs. Noom is here to change that. Noom Weight uses psychology. That's why they say losing weight starts with your brain. But it also takes into account your unique biological factors, which also affect weight loss success. The program helps you understand the science behind your eating choices and why you have cravings. Everyone's journey is different, so your daily lessons are personalized to you and your goals. One of the great things about Noom is that it's nourishing instead of restrictive. They focus on progress instead of perfection. You don't have to give up carbs, or anything for that matter. Have cravings? Food FOMO? Noom can help you lose weight while still enjoying your favorite foods. To date, Noom has helped more than 5.2 million people lose weight. Stay focused on what's important to you with Noom's psychology and biology-based approach. Sign up for your trial today at Noom.com. That's Noom.com.
Ooh, a spicy question. I
because
love
the
it.
writing is sort of everything, right? Like you kind of can fix plot holes, but if the writing isn't
So some
there,
readers love that, and some readers are like, "But I wanted more of this." So it's kind of a gamble.
Hello and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. Joining me today is best-selling historical fantasy sci-fi romance author Katrina Kendrick, a.k.a. Elizabeth May. Hello. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Let's start with your newest novel, which is The Wayward Duke, out now, I believe. Tell us a little bit about it.
The Wayward Duke is about an estranged husband and wife who are forced to work together to code break for the Home Office to catch a killer.
Okay, a nice setup. And is this is part of the Private Arrangement series?
It is, yes.
And this is under Katrina Kendrick, your pen name?
Katrina Kendrick, yes.
Okay. Is this the fifth novel in that series?
Yes, it is the fifth novel. I had to take a minute. I was like, how many have I written in this series? Yes, it is the fifth.
Are they, from what I could see online, they're not necessarily sequential? Are they kind of standalone novels?
Yeah, they're standalone novels and they're interconnected. So other characters from the other novels might show up in any one of these novels, but they can be read. They can be read in any order.
Oh, okay, that's fun. I bet you probably have a lot of fun bringing in, like you say, the other characters to kind of pop in for a cameo or something.
I do, yeah. And there are some scenes that overlap as well between books. So it's like, even though it can be read as a standalone, a scene might happen in a previous book that also happens from a different perspective in a later book, and it just kind of fills them out.
Oh, that's so cool. So that you can be reading it and think, oh, I'm getting deja vu. Oh, it's because I've already seen this before, but from a different perspective.
Yeah, it'll be like, well, what was happening with that character in that scene? And so then in that character's book, I go into like what was going on with them in that specific scene, which is always so fun.
Oh, that's so cool. So am I right in thinking the first one of these was back in 2018?
It was in 2018, yeah. Wow, it's been a long time.
And are these the only novels that you've written as Katrina Kendrick?
They are, yes, so far.
So far, okay. Is this a series that you want to keep expanding and exploring?
I would love to, yeah. I mean, I definitely feel like there's a lot more that could be expanded and so many characters I would love to write from. So, yeah, it's just a matter of balancing it with my other contracted work, but we'll see.
So you do have like ideas for like the next novels in this kind of collection?
Yeah, so I'm working on one right now of a character that shows up in the fourth book. So that's an interlapping story with that book. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. And this series, so you've, prior to doing any writing as Katrina Kendrick, you did already release a number of novels as Elizabeth May. Had you already finished and released the Falconer trilogy by the time you started writing as Katrina Kendrick?
Yeah, the Falconer trilogy had been done for about a year by the time I kind of went into writing Katrina's books, because I had never really written like historical romance or like just proper non-fantasy type romances before. So I figured low pressure, I would just write it under a pen name and really enjoyed the process. So I just kept doing it.
Okay. Most of the time the pen name is to separate like a writing style. So like, was it so that you could write historical instead of historical romance instead of like historical fantasy like the Falconer is? Yeah.
So at the time, I was writing the Falconer as YA, as young adults. So at the time, it was mostly just to separate it from like teens finding it. But now my Elizabeth May name has kind of been brought more in line with my Katrina work. So I write adult as Elizabeth May now, and kind of similar spice level as well. So so people who like my Katrina books may end up liking my Elizabeth books, and then vice versa as well. So things have kind of shifted in the years that I've been writing.
Oh, okay. They started a bit further away, but they've actually come together much more than you expected.
Yeah, definitely. Because my Elizabeth May now incorporates, more adult romance, and and shares a lot in terms of like world building with my historicals too. So they're quite similar in terms of writing now. Okay,
that's interesting, and that's also, I would imagine, indicative of like what's trending and like what's popular in the industry at the moment, with obviously romantasy, crossover, new adult becoming very big over the last year or so.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I started working on, I can't really like share much about my current projects that I'm working on with Elizabeth because they're unannounced right now, but but one specific project that doesn't come out actually until the beginning of 2026, which is absolutely insane to think about, was one that I actually started working on prior to, so the current projects that I have now are ones that I sold actually prior to current market stuff. So current romantasy, the current romantasy popularity, this came after I sold these books. So so the one that comes out in 2026 was one I started in 2019.
Oh.
Yeah, so I've been working on it for quite some time.
Yeah. And here's a fun question I always like to ask people who write under a pen name or a pseudonym is, so was Katrina Kendrick, was that your first choice, or were there other options that you went through?
Katrina Kendrick was my first choice. I have no idea how I came up with it, though. I was just like, what sounds like something a historical romance author would be called? And it just sounded like a nice name. I think I went through like an entire list of like, nice sounding surnames. And I was like, that's the one. Because I liked Katrina, but Kendrick took a little bit of time.
Okay. Well, that's great. I think some people like really wrestle with it and they'll go back and forwards and like really struggle to make the final decision.
Yeah, I could definitely see why, because to be honest, I mean, if I could go back, I would actually choose a different name than like Elizabeth May, because I had not realized that there were other people also writing under that name, and B, the Canadian Green Leader is also named Elizabeth May. And sometimes back when I used to have my email up on my website, people would message me for her, and I'm like, I am neither a politician nor the person you are looking for. Please do not yell at me.
Oh, That is unfortunate. Yeah. But you are still writing under both names.
I am, yes.
Is the difference now that the Elizabeth May stuff has more kind of magic and fantastical elements, and you keep that out of the Katrina Kendrick stuff?
Yes. So far, my Elizabeth May books are strictly fantasy romance, and Katrina is more real world historical romance. Although at some point those things might intersect just for contractual reasons.
Okay. Do you work on one manuscript at a time, or are you the kind of writer that likes to have multiple stories on the go at once?
I try to work on them one at a time. I have a lot of difficulty working on multiple projects at the same time because I don't want to mix voices. So what I do is I just get really sort of hyper focused on one manuscript, and when I hand that into like an editor or something, and then by that point I'm ready to work on the next one under the separate name. But I really do struggle to kind of sandwich them. I have a friend who is able to work on approximately 3 manuscripts at once, and it boggles my mind. I don't know how she manages to not at some point intersect the stories, because I tend to find that if I am working on them at the same time, the plots start kind of looking a bit samey. I tend to incorporate the same things just because my brain can't get out of one story and into another. So I do try to keep them separate and just basically try to immerse myself in that particular work for that allotted amount of time.
Okay, that makes sense. I feel like it's definitely a personal choice, because I've spoken to authors who sort of thrive on having multiple manuscripts at once. I think in some of Brandon Sanderson's lectures, he talks about how he's normally working on like 5 or 6 things at once, but he likes it because he says, if you get bogged down in one thing, you just jump onto a different project, and then you kind of get excited because you're getting familiarized again with all these cool things that you had before, and then by the time that you're kind of like drained on that one, you can jump back to the one you were on before, and suddenly you're coming at it with like fresh ideas and like a fresh brain.
Yeah, one of my author friends who does a lot of IP work, so she's always working on different manuscripts at the same time. She does something that she calls the sandwich method, which is that she kind of opens up her writing day with what she considers to be the easy manuscript. So that might be, depending on where in the process she is, the drafting phase, which she finds to be quite simple. So it's less, it doesn't have to be as perfect. And before moving on to something more complicated, like the editing phase, where things have to be a bit cleaner, where you're trying to make sure all of the sentences sing. And then she ends the day again with something also easier. So then by the time she's finished with her writing day, she's a bit more relaxed and not so like kind of involved in something that's a bit more complicated. For me, I'm just I'm just like, I need to I just have approximately 8 cups of coffee and then just go straight into the complex thing and work on it for the entire day.
But I say this all the time, like a broken record on this podcast, like writing is absolutely about finding the way that works for you.
Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. If I get stuck on anything, my unstick method of choice is just simply take a nap. So I take a nap, and usually the solution kind of comes to me like in my sleep, and by the time I wake up, it's resolved itself. I just tend to find that if my brain tends to get overwhelmed, and that's when I get stuck. And so then if I rest, I find that I'm able to kind of get back into it with the solution kind of having presented itself in a dream, or just when my brain was processing information in a more relaxed state. So that's how I do it.
Sometimes you just need a reset. Like I've heard of authors in a similar situation just going for a walk or having a shower, or just doing something to basically disconnect your brain so that you can come back onto it, and then the solution, like you say, presents itself.
Yeah, I was actually watching a TikTok earlier about somebody talking about this, because somebody on Twitter, I think it was, asked the question, like, when people take 30-minute showers, what are they doing in there? And he was like, well, some of us are thinking, and the shower is one of the few places left in our lives that is not, plagued by technology. It is really one of the only places where, your mind is able to basically quiet itself, and you are just able to stand there without being interrupted by advertisements, by your phone going off, by all of these other distractions, and just basically kind of think through things. And so the shower is also someplace that helps me. And walks are absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it's just disconnecting, right? It's literally just like freeing yourself and your mind, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And, just quieting down and just kind of immersing yourself. My husband also notices that sometimes he catches me like basically kind of staring off in the distance, or just like staring at a wall. And he gets this worried expression each time. And I have to remind him, it's like, baby, no, I am working.
You've got questions? O'Reilly Auto Parts has answers. Need a pro you can trust? We've got that too. No matter what you need, our professional parts people have the training and expertise to help you do things right. Deep automotive knowledge, just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Getting back onto you and the two pseudonyms, I'm interested in. The reason I was asking whether you work on one or two manuscripts at a time is because I'm interested in, you've said that they have sort of moved closer to each other than they were at first, but I would imagine it's a different headspace when you're writing as Elizabeth versus Katrina. Do you find it easy to just sort of like take one hat off and put the other hat on?
I will say that I find it more difficult to write my Elizabeth books. So my Katrina books are approximately half the length of an Elizabeth book. So when I'm writing my Elizabeth books, there's all of this more in-depth world building. There is so much that goes into building each scene, because I am always having to kind of keep this really complex world, in my mind at the same time. And with world building comes a lot of, complicated issues with, the culture that you're building, the language that you're building, how those things influence relationships. And then you add a romance on top of that. And romance and world building together they both end up taking a lot of real estate up in a book. So when you're writing and you're trying to do a romantasy, especially a romantasy well, you have to be able to fulfill both of those roles adequately to please readers. So you have to do the fantasy part really well, and you have to do a really fulfilling romance really well. And so balancing those things is extremely challenging, and it can take up a lot of time and energy. And so when I switch over to my Katrina books, by that point I'm exhausted, I'm tired. I just want to write something that's fun, that I consider to be, as far as my job, to be more relaxing. So my Katrina books are basically what I call my breather books. They're my palate cleansers between my Elizabeth books. They just help me. I'm still able to work, and it's still my job, but it is something that is more relaxing for me to do between those more involved and complicated world building works.
Yeah, because the Katrina books are historical fiction, so obviously that kind of world has already been built for you, and there are multiple reference books that you can defer to if you wondered about something.
Yeah. So they are set in the Victorian era, which I'm really familiar with, and I don't have to do as much describing of the cultural aspects of that world. And, and that's really relaxing. So I can just basically focus more sort of on the central relationship, which is my favorite part to write anyway. And I don't have to do so much of that kind of external knowledge base for readers, because they're usually coming into it with some kind of knowledge of that era already. So they tend to fill in the blanks for me. Yeah.
You mentioned that you're very familiar with the Victorian era. Is that from like prior research or just like prior study that you'd done?
Yeah. So, when I started writing as Katrina, I had done a lot of previous research in the Victorian era. And, and so that kind of came naturally to me. The parts that I had to do more research on were basically, the different parts of London. I'm American, and even though I've lived here for 15 years, there are still certain aspects of it, of England or Britain culturally that I still grapple with. I'm sure that there are some things in my books that are the American does tend to seep in. I think I've improved over the years, but I did have to do a lot of ground research in order to reach that point, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. I lived in London for 5 years, and I could really only describe maybe like a third of it. It's just such an intricate, massive web of things that are going on at any one time.
Yeah, definitely. In my books also incorporate elements of espionage and sort of like criminal underworld as well. So there is that aspect of world building. That is a bit more of the fantasy aspect that I'm incorporating in the historical aspect, because, I had to do some research on espionage in the era, and it's not quite as exciting as what I present in the books.
No, I can imagine it's not.
No.
I remember that makes me think of, did you watch the adaptation of You, Carolyn Kepnes's You? They did the television adaptation, season 3 or something, season 4.
Is that on Netflix?
Yes, with Penn Badgley.
I have seen half the first season and I quite enjoyed it, but I haven't had time to catch up.
You just reminded me, in one of the seasons, he's in London and he's living in London. And this is more a sign of how pernickety English people are. But he talks about how it's a lovely commute to work. It's so beautiful. So he just walks it. And obviously people on the internet found the exact place that he is walking to and from. And they were pointing out that he's giving himself a 6.5 hour commute or something by walking this.
Oh, God.
Yeah, you're not alone in not fully understanding distances and places in London.
I will say that since moving here, it's really interesting to me because long commutes, distances are more relative here. When I lived in St. Andrews, it astonished me that after some months living there, I began to see 3 streets over as so far. Oh, that's so far. It's on the other end of town, and the other end of town is 3 streets. Yeah. But when I grew up in California, and it's bigger, and you just tend to spend most of your time in a car. And so, if you went through a 4-hour commute every day, that was just normal.
Yeah. Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. It's amazing how quickly we adjust to our own conveniences.
Definitely.
Getting back onto you, I wanted to dial it back a bit. I'm curious as to, so was The Falconer, which came out in 2013, was that your debut novel?
That was my debut novel, yeah.
Okay. And back then, did you always want to write across multiple genres?
Yes, definitely. So, I have a bit of or of a difficult situation happening with The Falconer because, it's well, and you know, it might be interesting for people to hear because it came out in 2013, and at the time, I had intended for it to be like adult. But the market for paranormal romance had basically collapsed in the United States. So all I had, if I wanted to publish it, basically was to submit it to editors as YA. Which, you know, ended up with me having to kind of adjust the content accordingly. And so recently I got the rights back, and so now I am actually re-releasing it as, you know, as the more mature book that I originally wanted it to be. And yeah, and so when I was rewriting it, it was like I have all of this other practice that I've had for over a decade of writing historical romance and all of these other books. And so when I went back and like basically did this incredibly major rewrite, I ended up incorporating more elements from my historical romances into the book. But yeah, I, you know, from the beginning have always been a big reader of historical romance, and other kinds of romance as well. Basically, inside the romance genre, I just tend to read romance, whatever different genres in romance, but that is my main genre. But I could definitely see, you know, that as time has progressed, you know, and growing more confident in my writing, I have been able to switch genres more easily, but I have always wanted to write in multiple genres. Yeah.
Ah, okay. That's really interesting. So I know you're currently writing under both names, and just based off what you're saying there and that we've talked about, they are kind of converging. Do you think at some point you are just going to start writing under one name?
I don't, it's hard to say, because, you know, things can change, but I have definitely seen situations where an author will write under two names, and then just eventually the publisher just starts putting out their backlist under that name. That happened with Victoria Schwab. Yeah, where she's just now, I think, exclusively publishing under VE. And, you know, so I wouldn't say it wouldn't, you know, it won't happen, because it might, but at the moment I'm pretty content with two, just because, you know, it's less confusing for readers at the moment. But yeah, if the two names end up, you know, really sharing more similarities than they are separate, it might end up happening that I just release or have my publishers re-release the backlist under one of the names, but we will see.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you never know with these sort of things. You don't know what it might turn out to actually be very useful to have two different lines, two different kind of brands with your writing. So who knows? Yeah,
I mean, in publishing terms, it makes things easier contractually because you know, we have a clause. Sometimes we have a specific clause in our contract where we're only allowed to publish under one name for a specific amount of time. And so publishing under two names is just more ideal. So then you're able to put out more works, essentially.
Yeah. No, I understand. Awesome. We are at the point of the episode when we head over to the desert island. So I will ask you, Elizabeth, if you were stranded on a desert island with a single book, which book do you hope that it would be?
Oh my gosh, I was trying to think so hard about this question. I have really struggled with it because I don't know if I have like a favorite book, but I have favorite authors and like my comfort blanket authors. And I definitely, think that if I had to choose one, it would probably be a Lisa Kleypas book. And Lisa Kleypas is just this, this amazing historical romance author. I have read her probably since I was like 12 years old, when I was way too young to be reading Lisa Kleypas novels. And she is absolutely brilliant. And I tend to do rereads of her books. And she wrote this book called Seduce Me at Sunrise that I just absolutely loved. It's like a friendship to lovers book. It is, it's just absolutely just like so romantic, just this longing, this yearning between the two characters, and everything about it just hits all of the things that I love about romance, and specifically historical romance. So I think I could read that one probably over and over again for the rest of my life.
Wow. That is a sterling endorsement.
Yeah.
And a great choice. That's exactly what you want if you are stranded on a desert island with one book.
Yep.
Awesome. Next up, I wanted to chat about world building, go a bit more in depth in that, creating characters, and advice for new writers. But that will all be in the extended episode available on Patreon.
What's unique is always you. It's always your voice. It's always the way that you build characters in the world, and those are the things that are going to bring readers back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Great. I think that's some great advice there. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for coming on the podcast and chatting with me and telling me all about your latest novel and your writing and publishing experiences. It's been really cool chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful chatting with you too.
The Wayward Duke is out right now. You can get it in all the usual places. And if you want to keep up with what Elizabeth is doing, you can follow her on Instagram @_Elizabeth May, or on her website, elizabethmaywrites.com. To support this podcast, like, follow, and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Follow along on socials and join the Patreon for extended episodes, ad-free, and extra bonus content, fun stuff. Thanks again, Elizabeth, and thanks to everyone listening. We will catch you on the next episode.